It's Ramon again, and this ethereal light behind me is a signal that the apocalypse is upon us, and the Paris Climate Accords have really generated the Armageddon that we've all been fearing, and that's why you must spread this video and share it to everybody you know, because this is the last signal, these blinders behind you, that this planet is really going to self-destruct. Why am I doing a video on the Paris Climate Accords? Originally I wasn't going to, but today somebody brought it up in a chat, as usual, because I don't really talk to people about politics in person that much anymore. But she was claiming that the Trump EPA chief is an idiot and that he was on Meet the Press and that he's a moron. And I asked, what's the deal? And she's like, well, the guy's basically denying that there's going to be any problems from withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord. I was about to say peace accord. But you have to realize that many of the people that are objecting now to the withdrawal actually don't know anything about the Paris Climate Accord. And this was no exception. This was somebody, I simply asked her to explain why it's so important. And this person had she didn't even want to have to explain it. She basically took it for granted that if you did not support the Paris Climate Accord, then there's no point talking to you, which is unfortunate, because when there's an international agreement, a lot of people simply don't pay attention to what it includes, to what terms are a part of it. So, I'm not saying that you should just agree intuitively that Donald Trump is making the right decision. But if you're against what he's doing, then you at least ought to be able to give a fair explanation about why you believe in what you're talking about in the viewpoint that you're putting forward, because otherwise you're just blindly following somebody else's opinion. So let's dive into it. I'm going to go through a number of positions of why there are people that they pretty much are behaving this way in the political establishment, all over the political establishment. In fact, also on the political left, beyond the establishment, that they're acting without reason. You should, if you're going to support an international agreement, you should at least be able to state your case. So without further ado, as you can see on the screen, I hate the establishment GOP and the people known as the cuckservatives. A lot of them also oppose the agreement, but that's because they've always believed that they can pollute as much as they want and that nobody should hold them accountable. Now, I don't agree with that viewpoint. A number of them have conceded to the Paris Climate Accord because they don't want to actually have to defend their positions on climate change or on the use of fossil fuels more specifically. They just want to be able to ensure that they, and by they I mean literally they, are able to use fossil fuels, while everybody else has to pretty much bite the bullet and limit their own consumption. And what does this mean? This means that the elites worldwide will and those are elites on both sides of the political aisle. They will continue to consume as much carbon as they want. They're going to continue to fly transatlantic and transpacific and continue to drive SUVs and have escorts and whatever, car escorts. I'm not talking about, beautified hookers. So I'm going to give one example here. And, you can see Michael Bloomberg is sort of an example. Michael Bloomberg was establishment GOP all the way as mayor of New York. Eventually, he just got rid of the GOP tagline because in New York City, you might as well just be pro-business, Democrat, whatever it has to be. Screw the Republican Party over there. In fact, I'm fine with Michael Bloomberg. He gave up, I think, a few years ago. He threw away the GOP label altogether and called himself an independent. Well, you're not really independent if you're a corporate shill that's representing the interests of yourself and your buddies. Okay, it doesn't matter who it is. And if it's Donald Trump, I'll agree too. If Donald Trump is looking after the interests of his cronies, then you're not really independent. Okay, an independent person is somebody who is able to give a position without the influence of people with vested interests. Okay, that's pretty much the most raw, rough, dumbed down definition of a political independent. So let's talk about one of these pro-Paris Accords Republicans. I don't know if I can get the graphic to look right, but I'll scroll through it to your benefit. Okay, GOP senator disappointed that Trump is withdrawing from the climate accord. Here, let me make it a little more visible for you. Sorry about that, but withdrawing from climate deal. Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine criticized President Trump's decision to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord on Thursday, saying she was disappointed by the move. Climate change requires a global approach. I'm disappointed in the president's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, she tweeted. Collins sent a letter earlier this month urging the Trump administration to stay in the agreement. She is one of at least 3 GOP senators who have supported staying in the accord, along with Senators Bob Corker of Tennessee and Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Trump announced Thursday that his administration will withdraw from the Paris climate deal during a speech in the White House Rose Garden, saying the Obama-era deal was very unfair at the highest levels of the United States. Many Republicans, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, praised Trump's decision, with McConnell likening it to Trump delivering yet another significant blow to the Obama administration's assault on domestic energy production and jobs. Obama slammed the decision in a statement, saying Trump would reject the future by pulling out of the pact negotiated under his administration with nearly 200 countries in 2015. The nations that remain in the Paris Agreement will be the nations that reap the benefits in jobs and industries created, Obama said. I believe the United States of America should be at the front of the pack. Obama and former Secretary of State John Kerry called for cities and states to take the lead on combating climate change in the wake of the Trump administration's decision to withdraw from the Paris Accord. So, look, I have plenty of criticism on both sides of this issue within the GOP. That's why I don't belong to the GOP. First of all, Susan Collins and the 2 other GOP senators are supporting the Paris climate deal probably because they have vested interests in it and not because they really believe in the effect of climate change. There's an issue when you have somebody who their entire career they pretty much advocate for the opposite policies for the that contradict the beliefs of their own constituents, and that's what Susan Collins and Lindsey Graham and Bob Corker do. They are all, representatives, in their case, senators of states that are Republicans, and they're representing the viewpoints of Democrats. Now, let's not make it too simplistic. Okay, yes, they can break with the GOP. There's nothing wrong with that. However, the Paris climate deal is one of the worst disasters in terms of economic planning of the past few decades. Okay, it's basically it's the environmental version of NAFTA except worse. What it does, in short, is it caps the carbon emissions of most of the Western countries, whereas the countries that are the heaviest polluters in terms of dumping toxic waste, in terms of actually polluting the ocean ways and the atmosphere, those are China and India and probably Thailand and the other Asian industrial nations. Those countries get off scot-free. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to meet any obligations. That's the reason that even if you're an environmentalist, the Paris Accord doesn't really advance anything in your sphere. The Western world can restrict carbon emissions all it wants. But when you're actually dumping toxic waste into waterways in the largest country by population in the world, China and India, then carbon emissions aren't really the worst problem in the world. The pollution of oceans is the worst. You have in the Indian Ocean, you have a massive garbage ball floating around. I heard it's the size of Texas, and you're worried about climate change. You're worried about emissions. You're worried about carbon footprint. No, you have to address that first, and you're actually not addressing that in the climate accord. So, excuse me, but kiss my ass, the entire GOP. How about you do address that? How about you do talk about ways to help the environment? The GOP cannot get a pass from the conservative movement on this, because conservatives are going to have to live in a dirty, disgusting world too. Okay, so I don't want to I put you guys first because I am disappointed in conservatives and the GOP, especially the GOP. I believe in conservationism. I believe that we should preserve wildlife. Okay, I believe in public parks remaining public and being shielded from exploitation by mining concerns. Okay, I'm not a supporter of the oil lobby. That's where I break with the GOP. That's one of the, a number of issues where I do break with the GOP very strongly. Okay, so let's move on to the next group of assholes who are griping over this agreement. Okay, the next group I'm going to call out are the Bernie-crats and their associates. You don't have to necessarily have voted for Bernie to be part of this group. You could be one of those fraud leftists that voted for Hillary Clinton, or maybe one of those Jill Stein people. If you're any of those people, you should understand that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. The Paris climate deal is an international agreement between oligarchs from all over the world that are convening in order to decide your future without actually looking at how you're supposed to survive in that climate. Okay, and no pun intended. But look, the very same people that you're saying put together this fantastic agreement are the same people that put together a number of other agreements that you're not so happy with. I'm going to pull up an agreement right now that you guys have pretty much had your way with just smearing all the time, justifiably, for being against workers and against the consumer. So here goes. So let's examine this. This is not the Bernie Sanders campaign website. This is not a Bernie fan website. This is not some sort of, hippie, lesbian bookstores website. This is the Bernie Sanders official U.S. Senate website. And it says on November 5th, 2015, that the bad trade deal is worse than I thought, as Sanders says. And what bad trade deal is he talking about? He's not even, he's talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But not only the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But let's get digging into this. It says, Senator Bernie Sanders issued the following statement today after the text of a proposed 12-nation trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was made public. Now that the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership has finally been released, it is even worse than I thought. It is clear to me that the proposed agreement is not, nor has it ever been, the gold standard of trade agreements. He was saying that directly, contradicting Hillary Clinton, who said it was the gold standard of trade agreements. And then he says this trade deal would make it easier for corporations to shut down more factories in the U.S. and ship more jobs to Vietnam and Malaysia, where workers are paid pennies an hour. The TPP is a continuation of our disastrous trade policies that have devastated the manufacturing cities and towns all over this country, from Newton, Iowa to Cleveland, Ohio. We need to rebuild the disappearing middle class, not tear it down. The TPP would allow foreign corporations to sue federal, state, and local governments in an international tribunal for passing an increase in the minimum wage or any other law that could hurt expected future profits. The agreement would threaten American laws that protect the safety of the drugs we may take, the seafood we feed our families, and the toys our kids play with every day. At a time when prescription drug prices are skyrocketing, the TPP would make a bad situation even worse by granting new monopoly rights to big pharmaceutical companies to deny access to lower cost generic drugs to millions of people. Outrageously, the proposed agreement includes violators of international human rights like Brunei, where gays and single mothers can be stoned to death, and Malaysia, where tens of thousands of immigrant workers in the electronics industry are working as modern-day slaves. It's ironic that both of those countries happen to be Islamic, but Bernie Sanders doesn't really make the, he doesn't connect the dots. Brunei and Malaysia are two of the easternmost Islamic countries in the world. I will do everything I can to defeat the TPP. We need trade policies in this country that work for the working families of our nation and not just the CEOs of large multinational corporations. So, okay, actually, a beautiful statement from, the idiot-in-chief of Vermont, Bernie Sanders, and I agree with him on it. The TPP was a horrible agreement, and in fact, there's a similar agreement that's already also down the pipeline. It is called, one second. So on the Atlantic side, the TPP is the Pacific Trade Agreement. There's I can't remember the acronym, but the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Okay, sorry if that's a little annoying seeing that pop up. But the TTIP, as I'll call it, has very many of the similar issues to the TPP. And what's really ironic is that many Bernie-crats really oppose the TPP because it was the first one coming down the pipeline. They don't know as much about the TTIP, except for, some of the more hardcore ones, which, I'm not gonna like take that away from them. I'm sure a lot of them are in tune with it, but the majority of Bernie-crats should be aware that the TTIP is a similar agreement that is between the United States and the European Union. So let's watch a little video that explains a little about it.
A giant free trade agreement is currently being negotiated between the European Union and the US government. Hidden within this deal are plans to include rules to give investors the right to sue governments. Many fear their inclusion presents a grave threat to democracy, public funds, and the development of public policy. These rules, officially known as investor-state dispute settlement clauses, are found in many international trade and investment agreements, mostly signed since the 1990s. They give investors based in a country where the agreement was made the ability to sue another signatory state if its policies have resulted in reduced profits.
So let's think about that. It's the same idea with the TPP. In the TPP, the Bernie Sanders people justifiably complained, and so did the Donald Trump people, by the way. Those were the two factions that were way, way, way ahead of the game in terms of trade. The other Republican candidates didn't really give a fair opinion on either of these, and they, to be honest with you, they didn't really explain their positions anyway, either Republican or Democrat. In fact, Hillary Clinton belatedly said she was opposed to the TPP, even though she was its prime booster in the U.S. government as Secretary of State. But here's the premise, okay? If you're let's say the city of Atlanta, and you want to ban, for example, a certain type of street light, for example, and there's a street light manufacturer over in, let's say, Bulgaria, if they're an EU member, I think they are, then the Bulgarian company can sue the city of Atlanta for targeting it and curtailing its profits. Now, I don't think that that's a fair, I'm actually not for government intrusion on the private sector, but we're talking about the sovereignty of local authorities here. We're talking about the sovereignty of national authorities here, and this would strip it away, and we would basically grant the real power to multinational corporations, essentially. They probably wouldn't be from Bulgaria, but they could be from countries like Germany. So instead of us suing VW for their, let's say, their lax environmental standards, as has happened in the past, even though those emission standards are kind of dubious now given the Paris climate deal. Instead, VW would be suing a country like the United States or like Canada. They'd sue, for example, the government of Ontario or the government of Montreal and say, you're screwing us. We need to make a profit here. You can't make rules like this. So let's keep watching.
Investors are increasingly using these clauses to sue governments for billions of dollars. In 2012, 58 new claims were filed against states, the highest number ever filed in 1 year.
Foreign investors and their lawyers and law firms are becoming more and more creative at the kinds of government decisions that they're attacking. 15 years ago, there were virtually no awards and very few cases. And now there are several hundred. That's a very large number in the context of international law and international adjudication.
Investors are suing on a whole range of government policies. American tobacco giant Philip Morris is suing Uruguay for $2 billion over health warnings on cigarette packs. Swedish energy firm Vattenfall is seeking over 3.7 billion euros from Germany because of a decision to phase out nuclear power following the Fukushima nuclear disaster in...
Okay, so listen to that. This could affect, I mean, it could screw people all over the world in different types of ways. And to be honest with you, I'm fine with countries, you know, let's say Uruguay would want to give away, you know, do away with their cigarette labels. I mean, it's a stupid idea, but, you know, let them sink. It's their problem. But that would actually cost less to have them repeal their statutes or change their laws than it would to have them have to go through this court case with an international or multinational company, MNCs as they are called, basically dictating their policies through the courtroom. It's the opposite of democracy. You know, if you want to repeal a law, it should be done in a democratic manner. It should not be done through the courts, or that should be the last resort. That should be only in the extreme case where democracy has fallen, has failed. Basically, voters have elected people that don't even care about the real execution of justice and keeping people's rights guaranteed. That's where it should happen. Now, and even in those cases, you have to make sure that the decision of the court validates the desires of the public. Okay, you can't have, in this case, you know, I always talk about how Proposition 9 or Proposition 8 in California, that decided, in my opinion, the case against gay marriage. You know, gay marriage lost by massive margins in California, and it was overturned by the Supreme Court. In this case, this is a court overturning the decision of a government, a sovereign government, to restrict tobacco usage and just label it. So I think it's even worse than that. So let's see some more of this of these hijinks.
Japan. And Canadian mining company Lone Pine is using a US subsidiary to sue the Canadian government for $250 million after Quebec placed a moratorium on fracking over environmental concerns.
It could be that all these actions have got a freezing effect on policy discretion, that states do no longer want to run the risk of doing things that displease investors.
Sometimes the mere threat of an investor-state dispute can be enough to kill legislation just because the policymaker is afraid of being sued.
Okay, so that's enough. What I'm basically getting at here is this agreement is made by the same parties, the same countries that concluded the Paris Climate Accord, and the same people, including Barack Obama, including Angela Merkel, including Hillary Clinton, including the Japanese government, including the governments of the European Union. They have signed on to this accord, and these leftist agitators that are always complaining, you know, oh, the elites are out to fuck us. The elites, they're trying to screw us in the ass. Well, in terms of the Paris Climate Accord, it's the same fucking people. So what are you trying to say, that the TPP is them trying to fuck you and the Paris Climate Accord is them trying to kiss you first? That's not the way people, you know, basically try. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. That's not the way the courtship process works, right? You know, they don't try they don't try to screw you first and then kiss you later, right? I mean, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here. Because they tried to get the TPP first and then the Paris Climate Accord. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about, basically two different deals, and in fact, three different deals. You have the TTIP, which is with Europe, the TPP, which is with, I always laugh when I say TPP, but it's with Asia Pacific, and Latin America. And then you have the Paris Climate Accord. And all of them, it's just NAFTA again, and NAFTA on steroids. We're talking about actually gutting the American workers' rights. And the Bernie campaigners and Bernie himself, they're not fooling me. They may be fooling his own supporters, but they're not fooling me. We should be out of all of these agreements. And if the United States wants to, or its constituent governments, let's say the government of Rhode Island wants to sign the Paris Climate Accord, excuse me, I'm 100% fine with that, and I'll get to that later. Okay, so the third target of this video is going to be the easiest target, which is the mainstream Democrat, liberal, Hillary voter, Al Gore supporter, Barack Obama supporter, all the typical people that you would find complaining about this agreement. Now, the Bernie supporters are the ones that are most contradictory, because, like I said, they're the ones that are supporting an international agreement made by corporate oligarchs and their government buddies, while they oppose agreements that are the exact same format, like the TPP and the TIPP, whatever it was. I'm making this video a day later, so I'm kind of having to rehash what I did yesterday. But long story short, the Hillary Clinton campaign, they were the most gung-ho about fighting climate change. But in reality, they know the least about it, and they're the ones that are basically, or at least the mainstream Democrats, they're the ones that are going to have to eat the most crow about the climate hysteria that's been going on. Because let's face it, if the situation had been as dire as Al Gore had predicted, or as a lot of the other climate activists like George Clooney and Leonardo DiCaprio were predicting, then the Paris Climate Accord wouldn't do shit. The exact things that they're trying to act against, which are air pollution, which are carbon emissions, will not be checked in two of the most important countries in the world, India and China. Let's take a look at how their footprint on the world is brought to bear by their share of world manufacturing, which is a UN organization that monitors a lot of these manufacturing statistics. And it shows, if you can see, I hope that you, here, let me zoom in a bit. Come on. Okay, so it says, what's the manufacturing value added share in GDP by region between 1970 and 2010? Actually, it goes until 2013. You see the Americas, there's been and the Americas includes us. Okay, we've seen a consistent drop from 22.2 to 12. And in fact, in developed countries of Asia, which is not China, they mean Japan and I think Thailand and a couple of those other countries, it's also dropped from 31.3% to 18%. Meanwhile, and this isn't like news, this isn't something that I'm making up. In Asia, you see East Asia, this is developing countries, okay? See developing countries. You see a climb from 23.3% to 26.8% in 2010, 2013, and in Southeast Asia from 16.4% to 24.1%. That's Vietnam. That would be probably Cambodia would count. I don't know how much manufacturing is done in Cambodia. Laos. You even have some of those countries that are notoriously oppressive, like Burma or Myanmar, as they like to call themselves now, which is a little better than it was a few years ago when you would basically be shot for looking at a cop the wrong way, which is probably still generally true. It's just not as common anymore. And then there's South Asia, which is also, it's fluctuating, but we're talking about just a percentage of the economy here. What's happening is that the manufacturing base of the United States is dropping and has been dropping for many years. That's one of the reasons that the Trump campaign succeeded. You can complain all you want. It's true. Americans have wanted to work in manufacturing again, and I happen to be involved in that. And I see that as a real factor in why Donald Trump did win. Whereas you're seeing a lot of our jobs just flowing to East Asia, Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent. Okay, so what's my point here? What does this have to do with global warming? Industrial waste and industrial carbon emissions, if these trends are going to keep going, as the Democrats and their cronies have wanted for years, they wanted to reduce the industrial footprint in America because they've been claiming that it's going to help control global warming, or as they now call it, because global warming is too unpredictable, climate change. Well, how's that going to help if you're actually exporting your manufacturing jobs to countries where they do less to control their carbon emissions? And in fact, under the Paris Accord, neither China or India or most of the other developing countries have any obligation to limit their carbon emissions until, I believe it's 2030. So it's a good question. And you know what? I'm not a climate change denier. I'm just saying that this Paris Agreement would have literally done nothing to change it. Okay, another brief note on why the Democrats are full of it when it comes to the climate question. This is from Forbes in 2013, and it has a cheeky headline, but blood and gore making a killing on anti-carbon investment hype. That's really what this is about. Vice President Gore, who, believe me, is one of the greatest frauds that has ever been. He never was. He never lived up to the hype of when he ran for president. He was not the smarter candidate than George Bush. Basically, there were two dumb candidates, okay, George Bush and Al Gore. So it says here, they have this company, Generation Investment Management, and they've been talking about the coming carbon asset bubble. They argue that such unwise and increasingly reckless investment strategies, I think that's a pun, reckless investment strategies, pose three broad risks which will cause carbon assets to become stranded and lose economic value, through direct government carbon regulation. As a result of market share losses to already competitive renewable technologies and due to socio-political pressures causing carbon-intensive businesses to lose their license to operate. Now, what Gore was talking about was really wishful thinking, because as I've never hidden the fact that I'm not a friend of the the oil lobby or defense contractors or anything. I'm not. I just believe they should swim their own way to shore. Okay, we don't need to give them basically their profits. If they want to do business, they should do it on the fair market, just like everybody else. And we shouldn't coddle the oil industry. We shouldn't coddle the fossil fuels industry. But what Gore is saying is kind of, he's going to the other extreme. He's saying, due to massive government regulation, which he himself lobbies for, these companies would actually lose their viability. And this is ridiculous. He's basically gambling on or trying to set the house against companies like ExxonMobil and BP and whatever. And surprise, surprise, those companies have, even BP, which was, incompetent during the crisis in 2009 with the Deepwater Horizon disaster, those companies have staying power. Here he talks about the browning of those green investments. As for taking the recent investment advice, it might be worth mentioning that some of GIM, that's Al Gore's company, earlier low carbon deals haven't always worked out so great. Optimistic that Democrat-controlled Congress would pass cap-and-trade legislation Gore lobbied for, GIM and David Blood's old GSAM firm took big stakes in the Chicago Climate Exchange for carbon trading. Accordingly, CCX was poised to make windfall profits selling CO2 offsets if and when cap-and-trade was passed. Okay, so these people have a massive financial stake in the success of these companies. Al Gore, for those of you that don't know, has been a busy man at making making money, you know, the easy way, basically lending his name and so-called credibility to institutions that have been out-and-out failures. I mean, he did that with Current TV. For those of you that don't know, Current TV was supposedly I'm going to scroll down because I can't show a Roger Waters album. I fucking hate him because, you know, because Pink Floyd for me was always about David Gilmour. Well, here we go. On top of that bad news, First Solar Incorporated, another GIM investment, got squeezed out of the solar panel market by cheaper Chinese products. According to Bloomberg, GIM dumped its last First Solar stock at a $165.9 million loss in 2012. So, look, I could keep going on and on. This is a business decision. The whole, and you know, I was getting into it before I saw that Waters album cover, but Al Gore, let's be clear about this. Al Gore and the climate hysteria people, they're using this climate change scare in order to enrich themselves. He had a hit movie. Current TV was a TV that was like a network that Gore purchased in order to provide an explicitly liberal counterpart for Fox News. They were pretty much trying to make it so that they could be to the left of MSNBC. This was, I think, in 2011. And that company went completely south. And what did he do? You know, I've seen Lionel Nation. I watch Lionel Nation is one of the podcasts that I watch every day, or you know, video series I watch every day. And he talked about how, and it's true, I saw it at the time too. It was very funny that Al Gore sold Current TV, a network that had reach into millions of homes in America, even though nobody watched it, to Al Jazeera, which is the state-run TV for an oil monarchy. So let that sink in for a second. Okay, so let's get back to what is the fundamental problem here. Okay, we've got all these people reacting to this Paris Climate Accord rejection by Donald Trump. I think the average person should get some perspective here. Who can't they trust and why? And I've given you 3 different factions just in the United States that you should not trust, okay? And I've been fair about it too, okay? The Republicans don't trust them because they don't give a fuck anyway about the environment. In any case, they don't give a fuck about the legitimate environmental movement. That's why you just had this bill that passed that they're able to go hunting with lead bullets now and you know, just shoot, you know, bear and wolf cubs. You know, I mean, what the fuck is that about? Is that really the way to give an alternative? I don't think so. You know, just because you disagree with climate change doesn't mean you can just go fucking shoot anybody you want. That's not human. Then the Bernie people are just complete morons, as usual. You can't support, on the one hand, an international agreement made by oligarchs and dictators and global elites like the Paris Climate Accord and then spend an entire 2 or 3 years campaigning against the TPP and the TTIP or whatever it was called. It doesn't make any sense. You can either oppose international globalism and corporate exploitation, or you can support it. And the Paris Climate Accord is along the same lines as the other agreements that you hated so much. So stop complaining, okay? If you want to do something about climate change, come up with an appropriate agreement that would cap industrial output for all the countries involved, all of them, okay? This is you do realize that if China continues to pollute at the levels that it is right now, then the Chinese people will soon probably have the just cancer rates that are beyond anything that we've ever witnessed in any other country, okay? They're basically poisoning their own people in the name of global competitiveness. Okay, so the Paris climate deal is not going to address that at all. In fact, it's just going to give 10 more years of full-on free reign, whatever they want. Them and India, by the way. So that's the Sanders people. And finally, and I just finished that part, the Gore people, the Clinton-Gore Democratic New Liberal or neoliberal, whatever you call it, New Democrats, and New Labour, by the way, in the United Kingdom, and those are the people that are the most to blame for this atrocity of an agreement. Because remember this, okay? If you have these people that are going around the world, just flying across the world, doesn't matter where it is. Could be Bahrain, it could be, you know, Dominican Republic, wherever the hell they're going. And all they're talking about is climate change and how we have to stop climate change, blah, blah, blah. And they're going all over the world. When you have countries that are literally falling apart anyway, they're not even going to be... Some of these countries like Nigeria are under such existential threats right now from terrorism, for example, or you know, economic collapse in the case of Venezuela. But they're not going to care about climate change because they're going to be starving or getting slaughtered by the time that the oceans are supposed to drown them. So why would they care about climate change? You're just out there talking about climate change because you have stocks in companies that are depending on this so-called carbon reduction boom or whatever, or you're betting, you're short selling, if that's the right term. I'm not like an investment expert. But you're basically short selling the carbon firms. You're short selling, let's say, what's that company called? Anaconda Mining, for example. I don't know if they're still around. There's all these mining companies around the world. I mean, ExxonMobil is the most famous. Royal Dutch Shell, Schlumberger. All those companies, you're just short selling them. That's basically what your strategy is, and you are basically picking your favorite and expecting everybody else to stack the deck for you. That's what you're doing. You're not really trying to save the planet. And you know what? Strip mining isn't something that I'm a fan of. Okay, I'm not here to stand up for the oil and gas industries that are actually legitimately causing problems to the environment. I oppose the Dakota Access Pipeline because I did want some sort of settlement that's amenable to local communities. That's what I believe in. I don't care about this global climate change nonsense. I care about local communities being able to make decisions that benefit themselves. Okay, it's not even an ideological issue. So, you know, you heard it here. If you want to comment below, let me know what your position is. And like I said, I mean, yesterday somebody was like, oh, he's an idiot. He's against the Paris Climate Accord. Well, why are you for the Paris Climate Accord? Let me ask you that. Okay, you want to defend the environment? Make your points. Tell me why this is a great agreement, because I don't see anything great about it so far. I see just an agreement that's going to benefit the players that signed the agreement, the actual people in the room. That's what I see out of this. So anyway, this is Ramon, Bold Like a Leopard. Maybe another video to come tonight. And have a great evening. You know, onward apocalypse.